As a dungeon master, when you play Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition, you are not only charged with learning the rules and the mechanics of the game, you are also charged with making sure that the players have fun, and this is really important. Now, this doesn't mean guaranteeing that the game always goes in a way that the players want it to go. It is, after all, a game, and there should be losing conditions. But, whether they win or lose, there are certain kinds of things which mechanically might occur in the game which players don't like. In fact, which players even hate. Welcome to PhD&D, everyone. I'm Dr. Bowers, and we're going to talk about 5 things in 5th edition D&D that players hate and how to handle them. Before we get started on this, however, there are 2 provisos worth noting. First of all, this is not a video about bad DMing. These are 5 things that players dislike, or 5 things that players hate. You're not a bad DM for doing them. Indeed, I think it's impossible to be a good DM unless you do a few of these things at least a couple of times. These are things that players hate, not things which should always be avoided. The question is just how to handle them, not to avoid them entirely. And secondly, the fact that a player hates something doesn't mean that it's okay for them to behave angrily towards the DM, say yell at them, threaten them, or storm out of the game. If I'm playing Tetris, for instance, I might hate it if several minutes go by without getting a long piece, but that doesn't really license me to behave in an angry manner, especially if I'm in the company of friends and losing my temper would make things very awkward. But with that out of the way, here are 5 things that players hate and how to handle them. For each of these entries, I'm not only going to list what the thing is, but also how common it is, how to mitigate the ill effects, and how to even use it constructively if possible. So, here are the 5 things. Number 5. Losing their stuff or having their stuff damaged. This is a pretty big one. Players don't like it when their PCs lose their stuff. And they don't like it when their stuff is damaged either. How common is this? Well, it's actually pretty common. Not only is it natural for your PCs to lose all their things if they ever get imprisoned, or if they ever get captured, or if they ever get forced to surrender, but there are also a whole host of monsters in 5th edition D&D which have ill effects on weapons and equipment. Gray oozes, rust monsters, and more can all damage a PC's equipment, which is, in a way, like taking it away. The player used to have a sword with this bonus to hit, but then they attacked the gray ooze, and now it's a sword with that bonus to hit. It's a worse sword. They lost the good sword they had before. So this is pretty common, but I don't think it's absolutely terrible or something that you must avoid at all costs. And this is for 2 reasons. First of all, if you plan ahead of time, you should be able to leave plenty of replacement weapons and replacement equipment and replacement stuff around, which the PCs can then aim to get to replace what they lost. And secondly, more than other editions of Dungeons & Dragons, 5th edition is built around the idea that your character advances and they get better and better at doing things which are intrinsic to them. If a 1st edition PC lost all their stuff, they would really be in a vulnerable spot. But if a 5th edition PC loses all their stuff, they needn't be in a vulnerable spot at all. Chances are they have all kinds of abilities due to their class or their lineage, which at least allow them to cast a couple of spells or do something cool. So it's not that big of a deal if they lose their stuff or if it gets damaged. As I said, you mainly just want to make sure that there's replacement stuff lying around. Now, as for using this constructively, well, this is exactly the sort of thing which Matt Colville described as lighting a fire under a PC. If you've got some PCs and they're not particularly motivated, well, take their stuff away. Make a condition on getting their stuff back that they complete the quest. There are more and less tactful ways to do this, of course. In one of my campaigns, for instance, a PC found a suit of armor. It was plate mail armor, so pretty good. What he didn't realize is that that plate mail armor was carefully sculpted and bore the insignia of a city watch nearby. And wearing the city watch armor without being a member of the city watch is illegal. So wouldn't you know it, as soon as the PCs approached that next town that had that city watch, they confiscated his armor. Oh, that player was mad about it. But I didn't cut him off from getting the armor back. Instead, this was a good opportunity to tie him to a quest related to the city guard. Oh, we'll give you your armor back, says the city guard, if only you do this and that. Meanwhile, the town had an alternate faction that said, oh, we'll give you replacement armor if only you do that and this. And so you want to do something like that, something where the loss of stuff is tied to a quest which they can complete to regain their stuff, and which also makes sense in universe. You don't want to take away a player's stuff because you accidentally rewarded their PC with something too powerful. In fact, a good reason to be stingy with magic items in the first place is because trying to undo it this way is so upsetting. If you're thinking about ever rewarding a magic item and you think, well, just don't reward it. Pick a different, weaker magic item, because once they've got it, you can't just take it away by fiat. Players hate that. Moving on to number 4, surrendering. Players hate surrendering. They hate it so much that it almost never occurs to them. It's tantamount to losing. One reason why this may be is because PCs seldom, if ever, take prisoners. Most fights in most D&D campaigns that I've played in, at least, are fights to the death. With the PCs treating every enemy NPC that way, it's no wonder they don't expect to be treated any differently. But PCs hate surrendering for more reasons than just the fact that it counts as a losing condition. When PCs surrender, that means that they're going to be imprisoned or in some other way at the mercy of NPCs. They are in a situation, in other words, where NPCs can tell them what to do. And many players feel like this is a loss of autonomy, that it's a kind of way of being railroaded, and that they have no control. Now, is this common? No, it's not. I almost never find PCs forced to surrender. Indeed, as I said, most players don't even consider surrendering. Now, the way to mitigate the ill effects of having the PCs surrender is to, of course, give them options within their conditions of surrender. If they're being taken to a prison, let them choose who they associate with and what they do for prison duty. If they're being interrogated, don't require them to say specific things or give specific answers. Give them leeway and let them have some fun with how they engage with their interrogators. If and when surrender occurs, in other words, make sure that it doesn't come with a complete lack of choice or lack of options, or at least lack of perceived options for the players. As for the question of can you use this positively, the answer is yes, obviously. In fact, many beloved adventures and campaigns begin precisely with the PCs being taken prisoner. Out of the Abyss is one of them, and really, you don't have to open an adventure with that. You can have a new chapter take place in the middle of a campaign with the PCs taken prisoner. And taking PCs prisoner is sometimes useful to do if the players feel that they're wandering, that they're aimless, that they have no goals, and that nothing exciting is happening. A jailbreak is always exciting. Related to surrendering is number 3, running away. Players do not like having their PCs run away. Like surrendering, it's one of these tactics that players seldom even consider. Here, the problem with running away isn't quite the same as the problem with surrendering. While many players see the condition of surrender as like a loss of autonomy or a loss of agency, they tend to see running away as more a loss of opportunity. They have this really cool character sheet after all, they have this cool PC with all these abilities, and they didn't get to use them. Instead, they had to run away. Or, instead of a loss of opportunity, it can be a loss of efficacy. They wanted to kill the monster with their cool abilities, and they didn't get to. Instead, nothing happened, and they ran away. Now, the way to mitigate the ill effects of running away, or the ill effects of retreat, are just to be honest with your players. You should tell your players sometimes that this enemy is too powerful for you. Or, if you don't retreat, this enemy might kill all of you. Give them a warning or communicate some information which their player characters would know, even if they don't. Remember, the player characters live in this universe. They see monsters, they see creatures, they see places all the time that the players do not see, and so sometimes there's some things that the player characters might know, like, whoa, this monster is too tough for us, which the players might not think of. If you communicate to your players that retreat is an option, and maybe even a favorable one, they won't feel so bad about retreating. Now, can you use the need to retreat from a monster as a campaign tool? I think the answer is yes. If you consider some Metroidvania video games where you explore a huge map and certain areas get unlocked as you achieve certain goals, you can imagine a place for scripted retreat. Or if not scripted, at least probable retreat. Say that there's an area which is guarded by a monster, and that monster is fearsome and can only be defeated once a certain item has been found. Players who don't yet realize the necessity of the item might try to wander into the area and then encounter this foe. If the DM was clear enough in communicating all the information that's necessary, then the PCs should realize that they need to retreat, maybe go and research the monster, learn about its weaknesses, eventually find the item, and then return, and once they return, they can defeat the monster and the area will be open to them. The trick, of course, would be letting the players know that retreat is an option. Now, the PCs retreating is one thing, but something that the players really hate is when a monster retreats. If a monster retreats and gets away, the players hate that. Their PCs might be on the way to save the world from imminent disaster. They might literally be on their way to save the world, and they encounter a group of bandits, and one of the bandits runs away. That party will go off track and let the whole world be destroyed in order to track down that one bandit and kill him. They do not want a monster to get away. No players do. How common is this? Well, not too common, partially because players hate it so much. Is there a way to mitigate the negative effects? Oh yeah, absolutely. Allow the PCs to track down and kill the monster that got away. And is there a way to use this phenomenon as a campaign tool? Oh, absolutely. First of all, if you want the PCs to go to a certain area, just have them fight a group of monsters nearby and have one of the monsters escape to that area. Your PCs will end up going to the area just to track down the monster that got away. And secondly, and more importantly, if you want your players to really hate a monster, maybe a villain or a villain's lieutenant, have that lieutenant or villain escape from battle. If there's a monster which keeps getting away despite your PC's efforts to kill it, your players will obsess over killing this monster. They're going to make memes about killing this monster. They're going to talk about killing this monster. Every session is going to start with, all right, we need to find this monster and kill it. So it's a really easy, quick way to drum up some antipathy towards your villain, if you like. Have them attack and flee. And the final, number one thing that players of 5th edition Dungeons & Dragons hate is having their PC taken out of the action. There you are, in the middle of the battle, and one of the PCs becomes stunned. Because they are stunned, they cannot do anything in battle. So the player just has to sit there and watch all the other players play and listen to them have fun. Now, 5th edition tried to get around this by making sure that in most cases, when a player character gets stunned or gets charmed or gets knocked unconscious, they can repeat their save at the end of every round. But this isn't always the case, and even when it is the case, it doesn't always get around the problem. Sometimes the stat that's in question is a player's dump stat, so they're going to make charisma saves round after round after round, but they're never going to succeed on those saves, and so they stay stunned or they stay incapacitated. Is this common? Well, not too common, but more common than it should be. One way to mitigate this is to just change the duration of the stun, or change the duration of the condition that takes the PC out of the action. If the statistics say that the PC is charmed for a minute, just change that to 1d4 plus 1 rounds. Furthermore, if the PC is charmed or possessed, say by a ghost or a demon, make sure that the player gets to decide, at least within a certain range, what that PC does. Suppose the party is fighting a Cybriex, for instance, and the Cybriex charms a rogue, and says to the rogue, "Kill those people," referring to the other party members. The player, in that case, who controls the rogue, would have a lot more fun if they got to choose which of their allies to attack, how to attack them, and so forth. Now, can you use the phenomenon of taking a PC out of the action as a campaign tool? Well, it's difficult, but not impossible. Really, when it comes to using this as a campaign tool, I'm thinking about players who can't make it to the session, or maybe NPC allies or sidekicks that you just don't want to have to deal with during a certain combat. In such a case, it's useful to just stipulate without even rolling that those characters are stunned, or that those characters are charmed, or that those characters are just taken out of the action by some power which the monster actually has. This is a way to both take the problematic extra NPCs out of the combat, and also quickly communicate to the players of what powers their enemy actually possesses. So, those are 5 things that players hate in Dungeons & Dragons, and how to deal with them and how to use them. That's losing their stuff, surrendering, running away, letting an enemy escape, and then getting taken out of the action. These are all things that players hate, but they're also things that are natural to occur in a campaign, and which you can work around and even use positively if you're careful. What do you think? Do you think that there's some item that should have been on this list and it was wrong that I left it out? Or do you think that one of these isn't nearly bad enough to be on the list? Let me know in the comments. In addition, I'd like to give a quick channel update. I'd like to talk about some things that I've got planned for the future of this channel and how things are going right now. As I've mentioned before, I'm an adjunct professor of philosophy at a couple of different institutions, and since it's the very end of the semester and I'm turning in my final grades, I have been a little bit busy this week. My apologies, therefore, for churning out videos a little bit more slowly than I normally would. However, I thought I would let you know what I'm working on for some future videos. There's a video I've got on how to run time travel in 5th edition and make a fun time travel campaign. There's a video I've got on the concept of an elemental, and what the relationship is between, on one hand, the sorts of stuffs that get elementals made out of them, and on the other hand, what the metaphysics of a world is that contains those stuffs. I'm also continuing my Ravenloft video series. I've got an adventure put together for Valachan, I'm putting together another one for Ekath, and there are a few other fun domains too. I'm also putting together a quick, fun Spelljammer adventure. That's right, I haven't said anything about those big announcements. Spelljammer and Dragonlance are coming, that's pretty cool. And finally, there's a video I'm working on where I advise DMs to take some inspiration from those old point-and-click adventure games by Sierra Online, especially Quest for Glory and King's Quest. So those are a few topics on my docket, and my rate of video output will increase once I turn in my grades and have at least a month off for some of the summer. Maybe I shouldn't say off, because I am working just a different job, but in any case, I'll have more time for videos. Thanks very much for watching, let me know what you'd like me to cover in the future, and I'll be in touch. See you next time.